feature presentation.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Untitled Movie Reviews. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck, alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Hello, Matt. Do you like scary movies?
I do, Eric. I do. Yes, today we are finally reviewing Radio Silence's Scream 2022, starring Melissa Barrera, Mason Gooding, Jenna Ortega, Jack Quaid, Marley Shelton, Courteney Cox, David Arquette, Neve Campbell, and more. Before we get going, I will say this will be a spoiler-filled review of Five Cream, and shout out to the Kind of Funny crew for the five cream that I've been using. Go listen to their review as well. They had a really great conversation about the movie when they were able to see it when it actually came out. So Eric and I, we didn't get to see the movie until recently because theaters in Ontario were closed. Eric saw it a week or two ago. I recently saw it this week, finally. And I've been dying to talk about it. Scream, one of my favorite horror franchises, a franchise that I revisit quite frequently. And I'm very excited to talk to Eric. I'm just kind of stalling because I want people to know we're going to spoil this movie. So if you don't want to hear spoilers and you haven't seen it yet, um, I do think it's worth seeing without saying really anything. It's not perfect. I have quite a few issues with it, but it's still a Scream movie. And if you like this franchise, I do think that you'll at least have a little bit of fun with this. Um, that being said, Eric, I don't know if you want to say anything before we go into spoilers quickly.
Ghostface is the host with the most.
Okay. Okay, we're gonna start spoiling the movie, everyone. So
So ready or not.
hey, love that. How you doing, Eric? This was our first movie back in theaters, right? Since
Yep.
the shutdown again. So
And it
I
was
mean,
another Paramount movie that we were itching to see in the same
right,
way that A
Tenet.
Quiet Place Part
Oh,
2
yeah.
was that film that, people were seeking out through the drive-in in the summer.
Mhm.
And, I think we both saw it though on like Amazon
I
Prime.
did, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I probably would have watched Scream on demand. I am glad I went to a theater. I still, we went to Clarington Cinemas and saw it, so that was fun. I haven't been there in a decade because we went to go visit my parents on the weekend, and that's the closest theater to them. They have full recliners there, like Landmark, but it's a weird. This is so local that no one listening to this cares, but like it's one of those old, like, it doesn't even have stadium seating theaters, so like Ajax, or if you're in Toronto, the Rainbow Cinemas and shit like that, where it's just like the slanted floors, but they have full recliners. So it was kind of weird and quaint to be in this old crummy Cineplex theater watching Scream like how it should be, because Nevis and I went to go see the original in Ajax a few months ago and saw the first one on the big screen for, I think, the first time for both of us. But it was fun to get back to the theater. There was only one other group of people with us. They talked throughout the whole thing, but it's fine.
Did you tell him to
Um,
shut up?
no, I talked about this a little bit on the 114th Untitled Movie Podcast, which you guys should go check out. We talked about Oscar nominations and different things like that. I'm trying to be better, Eric. Not
You
better
got
as in,
soft, Matt. You need to
I
put more
know.
of that
I
five
think
cream on.
I think the escape room experience like broke me so
Oh
much.
God.
What, like, the first movie back, I'm like, I'm gonna get stabbed. So I didn't want to, and they weren't like, they were pretty far behind us. And like a horror movie, horror comedy and kids movies, I kind of give people a pass because I feel like they encourage engagement from the audience, and like especially in a whodunit jump scary slasher movie, like a bunch of teenagers are in the back and they're talking to one another, it didn't really hurt the experience. But anyways, Five Cream,
Yep.
Eric, do you want to kick it off? Like, what is this iteration of Scream? Even the title, a little bit of a spoiler. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, Five Cream, as it has been affectionately called, is basically a reboot, sequel, There's a turn of phrase within the film that is called a requel, that is kind of what they're trying to pitch. I think most people will still, when it
Legacy
comes to
sequels.
legacy sequel, when it comes to film criticism and writing, but you got to appreciate the attempt to kind of do something new with the combination of it.
Terminology, yeah.
And yeah, and obviously, a big part of why people go to see the Scream movies specifically is sort of the meta commentary on the state of horror movies. And since this is the, first one back since what, like 10 years ago, was
2011,
yeah, the Scream 4. So, you get a lot of sort of references and commentary on elevated horror, and
yeah.
so the Babadook, it follows a lot of the A24 stuff.
Robert Eggers, Ari,
Yeah, and
yeah.
toxic fandom
Ari
in general,
Aster.
and that's kind of interesting as well, because
Its
like,
thesis is about toxic fandom.
yeah, it's
essentially.
a very, we were talking on the the regular show that you have a lot of whodunits coming out, and it's funny that in this world Ryan Johnson directed the
Stab 8.
Stab 8, the one that none of the fans liked, and in a way
Direct reference to Last Jedi.
yeah, and Knives Out was kind of a reactionary film to the toxic fandom of people, of Star Wars fans reacting to, like, there was a little bit of like this sly kind of
Yeah.
commentary there, and Five Cream is kind of doing that with horror fans, specifically how a lot of fandom,
Not even just horror, but like just
just
fandom.
online fandom, but there's always been a weird kind of place when it comes to slasher movies, specifically when it's sort of looking back at, like, Halloween obviously being the big one, and it kind of Scream following in its footsteps, even to the point where this legacy sequel is also doing the same thing that David Gordon Green's Halloween kind of did, and bringing Jamie Lee Curtis back into the fold. You get Neve Campbell, you get Courtney Cox, you get David Arquette, with a new cast of actors kind of taking
Skeet.
on.
You get Skeet.
You do get Skeet. I think that was kind of the biggest surprise, that
It was a huge surprise
that
to me.
I didn't have any idea that was
Same.
coming.
I didn't at all, dude. It caught me so
D.H.
off guard.
Skeet Ulrich,
I was not.
those
expecting
bangs
to
are
see-
back and ready for action.
It makes no sense why she
Well,
would be seeing him like that.
I
but, like,
also wasn't sure,
I
because
guess
I know
maybe 'cause
you
of the movies and
rewatched
stuff, yeah.
the movies recently. I was
I
trying to,
watched
like,
all of them. Yeah.
okay, who is the mother? Was the mother in one of the previous
No,
films?
so the mother they allude to, we
So
don't know.
Melissa
who that
Barrera's
is. Yeah.
character, who's kind of the new Sydney Prescott, she was in The Heights, is kind of the new final girl, and probably will be the
one moving
new
forward,
lead moving forward.
Who
And
I hate to start this way. Didn't think she was very good.
I
Like,
didn't mind her. I thought,
dude,
honestly,
there was one time
she's this is good. This is gonna sound bad.
she's no
She-
Neve Campbell.
No, she's no worse than Neve Campbell was in
Yeah.
that first movie.
That's
because
fair.
Neve Campbell's not great
And I don't
in that
think you
first
need.
film.
I agree. Dude, I
I
absolutely.
mean, it's all
agree.
about the magic of Matthew Lillard.
I absolutely agree, and I don't mean that as like a slight. It was distracting at times for me because I felt like everyone else in the cast was really good, which the Scream movies, the supporting casts, I think are always a lot of fun. And I agree with you that Neve Campbell wasn't great in
I mean, a
most
lot of
but you don't need
the
to be
original
great.
cast isn't
Yeah.
great. But what's kind of interesting,
They
looking back
work
at
in
it
this.
now as a time capsule, is a lot of those actors that were in that first movie, where they are in like the 25, 26 years that would follow, and how, they had been popping up in other roles. I mean, I joked about Matthew Lillard, but he did really good work in both Twin
The
Peaks: The
supporting
Return,
cast, yeah.
and even in The Descendants. But looking like just to see where all of those actors went after that first movie, it'll be interesting to see where this new group of young actors goes in the next little bit. I mean, I mentioned Melissa Barrera already being in The Heights.
Yeah.
Jenna Ortega, who plays her younger sister, who's in the opening sort of prologue of the film, and that was the thing that I think I was most disappointed with, because the prologues in the first two Scream
Have always
films
been so iconic, right?
are the best parts of those movies. Even
And
the
they're kind of
third one,
stunt
which I don't
casted a little
like,
bit. Yeah.
with 100% cotton,
Yeah.
is a good sequence. And I like Jenna Ortega. I think she's actually quite
I
good
like
in
her a
the
lot in
film.
this. Yeah, yeah.
But and I still got to watch the Fallout as well. That's but I digress. But that opening sequence, even though it kind of gets into like settling into like, oh, it's going to talk about elevated horror, we're going to go back to, referencing the
The
first Stab
original movie.
movie
Yeah.
as well,
And
with
the
like
first
Heather
Scream, yeah.
Graham and all that kind of stuff, and like the original versus a new version, all this kind of stuff. And it was a little underwhelming, even though it also sets a tone that this is going to be quite brutal in its kills.
Yeah. And
um
also different because she survives, right? Because
Yes, yeah, because usually the people in the opening prologue
I would
die
have liked
horribly.
stunt casting though. Like I would have liked a big name that they kill off right away. I know, and that's going back to some of the points of the movie of me going, "Oh, I wish they just did what
Well,
they did in the other movies."
but I
Right?
think there is an intention there because of, spoiler, them killing David Arquette about
Yeah.
halfway through the film, where I think if you were to kill someone, like say if you did bring Neve Campbell back to just kill her off in the beginning, and then you also killed David Arquette halfway through, maybe the impact wouldn't be the
Sure.
same. And so the thing that I like the most in this movie is David Arquette's performance. I
He's
think this
great.
is the
Yeah.
best performance not only of his in the series as Dewey Riley, but the best performance of his career, because within this slasher social commentary sort of meta horror film, you have this weird kind of pseudo gunslinger western, the old
Broken Arrow,
sheriff
baby.
coming back into town
Bow,
with that Broken
bow.
Arrow riff that was originally used in that movie, and now is considered Dewey's theme, um being used. And I really like that he's kind of grizzled, and yet he's still willing to help this new generation
Yeah.
kind of get through what they're about to kind of experience. The other thing that I felt was very obvious, and I didn't know because I didn't really watch too much of the trailers, or I think
Neither did
you
I. Stayed
avoided a
away.
lot of the
Yeah.
stuff online, but I kind of knew who one of the killers was as soon as I saw her, and that was Mickey Madsen, who a lot of people will probably recognize her from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Loves being set
She
on fire.
and that also I think is deliberately
Oh, I think,
referencing
yeah,
Once Upon a
totally.
Time in
Yeah.
Hollywood. But as soon as I saw her, it's like $100, she's one of the killers. It's too obvious, and like
Even
especially
Jack
knowing that
Quaid is like,
performance though.
yeah. And sorry, I cut you off when you were kind of describing what the movie's about. But I mean, I think everyone kind of
Yeah,
knows.
it's literally a new generation in
And everyone
Woodsboro
listening to this, it's a spoiler review anyway. So,
are being stalked
and
by
they're all related.
Ghostface. Yes, and they're all connected to, in some way or another, to the original either
Killers.
surviving members or deceased members. So Jamie Kennedy's Randy is the uncle to the twins, played by Mason Gooding, son of Cuba Gooding Jr. And
Oh,
you have,
really?
yeah, and then you have
Didn't know.
Jasmine Savoy Brown, who
Right.
was
Who's
really
in
wonderful in
Yellow
Yellow Jackets
Jackets
and
and
The
the
Leftovers.
leftovers. Yeah.
And she's kind of like the Randy in this, with the exception of she's a much better actor than Jamie Kennedy,
I
and she's
like him in the
less.
Scream movies. But
He's
I agree that
fine.
she's a better actor.
And
Yes.
and she's less obnoxious. Like, even though
Yes.
she's doing the kind of like,
Film
oh
explainy thing. Yeah.
yeah, I found that like she's more likable
And I think
overall.
she's better than what's his name was in 4. I mean, I like Rory Culkin,
I didn't mind
but
Hayden Panettiere. She was
Hayden
okay as
Panettiere was good. Yeah.
Kirby, because she was
Kirby was
kind of
great.
like,
I liked Kirby a
I
lot.
don't
Yeah.
like that movie, but I thought she
I
was
like
good,
4
and I
quite a bit.
really liked, and I don't mean it like I didn't like seeing him get killed the way he did, but when Anthony Anderson gets killed,
It's
it is
brutal.
brutal.
His knife through the head.
But
And
there
Adam
are,
Brody, who reminds me of Jack Quaid.
yeah, he kind of has that look, but then also like there are moments when he does go full serial killer that he does look so much like his dad, especially late Dennis Quaid movies
Yeah,
where
yeah.
like you have something like The Intruder where like Dennis, the way like he smirks and like
Yes.
hides behind corners is kind of weirdly comical. And like obviously like Jack Quaid you are very familiar with
From The
because of The
Boys.
Boys,
Yeah.
but you have a lot of up and coming actors here who I think will be really interesting to see where they go like in the next 25 years, 26 years of their careers,
Mhm.
because it does feel like these people, a lot of them will be seeing quite a bit of,
I
not
think
just
so
in
too, yeah.
Scream movies, but just in general. And I think that that's always kind of what I've liked about the Scream movies, on top of the, you know, the kills and sort of the references. You look at all four of those movies, especially the original trilogy, even just the first two films, how many kind of notable actors there are, like even in the second one, like
Timothy
Timothy
Olyphant.
Oliphant,
Yeah.
you know, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Jada Pinkett Smith, Omar Epps, Rebecca Gayheart. Like it's like there are tons. Joshua Jackson has like almost a blink and you miss it role in the film course sequence, that when they're talking about like the
You got
best
Jerry
sequels.
O'Connell in the third one.
Well, second one.
Oh.
Yeah, he's in the second one because he's
So
Sydney's.
Oliphant's in the Oliphant. Timothy Oliphant is also in the second one?
Yeah,
They're all so the second
yeah.
one, yeah,
So the
rules.
second one,
Yeah.
the killers are Laurie
Yeah.
Metcalf and Timothy
Yeah,
Oliphant.
Aunt Jackie, yeah.
Yeah,
Just going crazy at the end. It's so silly. And that's what I mean. Like, I really love, I think, all of these movies, and love to a certain extent. And I only
I
really
hate
think
three.
three's not good. Don't get me wrong. I think three is the most objectively bad one out of them, but I
Yeah,
still
except
have
the beginning.
fun. I still have fun watching it. And that's why I think I really enjoy all of these movies and this entire franchise. Because even though I didn't love Five Cream, they're still just fun to watch and fun to try to figure out, whether it's the kills, the references, the meta humor, just the meta-ness in general. Like, I do think this is a retreading a little bit of the stuff that they did in 4 with reboots and stuff like that. Like, they kind of tackled the same subject matter. They just added the elevated horror stuff or the legacy sequel thing, which wasn't really like super popular. It just started to kind of take off probably in the early 2010s. But I mean, we've had them before, but now we're getting them left and right. But I had fun with the movie. Like, I think it has its problems, and I think it embraces some of the Scream silliness and you know, the coincidence, or even just like, if you really think about it too hard, you're just like, wait, she was living in Stu's house, but then she was friends with Randy's niece and nephew, and they had no problem hanging out at the house where their uncle, he wasn't murdered, but he
No,
was
he was
almost
murdered at the
murdered. Yeah, he was
college
the
in the
next year.
van.
Sure, I know that.
It'd be
But
funny
he
if
was still there,
she was
Eric.
living in the same van.
He was still there, and all of his friends got murdered at that house. And like, just the coincidence of them being friends and all the connections is so silly. But like, I think that's kind of part of the fun of this franchise. And I think there was just enough of the old cast. I agree with you that David Arquette, I think, is really good in this. I think Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox are used sparingly.
But I have a
Um,
problem with them being used in it, not because of their performances, but it does feel like we've talked about this with Jurassic Park, where it's always harder to get the characters back on the island again, and it feels like especially Sydney is so far removed now
Like, why
from.
would she, even if
Yeah.
Dewey dies? Like, I didn't like the reaction to Dewey dying, of them just kind of being like, we're sad. All right, we're good. And then like,
Well, I think they're so focused
I know,
on
on getting the
ending
killer,
this that
yeah,
it's like they there's no time to
to
really
mourn him,
yeah.
yeah.
Like I could understand, maybe, I mean, obviously Gail coming back to it because of, you know, that's where her career kind of picked up and things like that, but it does feel like those characters are more shoehorned into this than anything else, like in the same way that, again, like when you're finding an excuse for Jeff Goldblum to go back, or getting Sam Neill to go back to Jurassic Park.
Where
um
Arquette feels kind of organic,
well,
right? But like,
Arquette's just always kind of stayed there, like, and
yeah,
it kind of makes sense, like even with like how his relationship, both, you know, to Courtney Cox in real life, you know, being falling in love, getting married, then getting divorced, but still kind of being friends, and like between Scream 5 or 5 Cream, and you cannot kill David Arquette. I never disliked David Arquette, but I never really kind of gave
WCW champion David Arquette.
but I never really gave much of a thought to him.
Yeah.
But after watching that documentary and watching this, I actually really kind of like him. And I think that like him kind of just being that old town kind of like,
Retired
retired
sheriff.
sheriff, kind
Yeah.
of still kind of almost in like a weird, middle age arrested development really works. But again, like it just does like Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox kind of being brought back into the fold doesn't work in the same
I
way.
agree with how they get there. I didn't mind the use of them in they're not like the focal point of the movie. Obviously, their history is the focal point of the movie, but
It's all
um
about legacy.
I agree that like the way you bring them in isn't great. And then I don't even love like I said how they handle the Dewey stuff even if I get what they have to do, but I agree that like
Well, his
you know
death is very like again, it's I didn't get like emotional or anything, but I think like his performance and when like he goes back to try to shoot
which is
Ghostface in
really
the head.
dumb. Like he's done
I
this like
know that,
7
but
times like shoot
like when he says like it matters to him, like
I
you
agree,
you
that
feel
works.
that.
Totally. I
Yeah.
don't like the stupidity, which is something that bothered me in
But Dewey's
Halloween
always
Kills.
been a little bit
Doofus, which is like
yeah,
which I can
scary
buy.
movie.
And I can buy into that more because of the character, even though
Yeah.
like you're like, why didn't you pull the mask off? Why didn't you shoot the killer in the head? Like, Dewey, you've done this like 4 or 5 times now that like you should have done those things, but you can get a pass because the character's kind of been aloof or whatever throughout the series. Even though
And I
he's
also
been
think that maybe in the moment as well, you're not necessarily clearly
fair.
thinking when you've gone through something. And also, I mean, he like
It's
the
not
other
as
thing.
egregious as Halloween Kills, where
No,
they
no, no,
just
no,
like
no. But I like that he's
everyone's dumb.
also wearing his scars and like just the
I like
the
the line of
the
having a
wear and
limp again.
tear. Yeah, well, the wear and tear though of
Yeah, that's
just
what I
having
mean. Yeah.
gone through it all and so much. I think the other thing that I wasn't the biggest fan of when it comes to the references and thinking how clever the movie is, even though I don't think it is anymore. Scream came at a time where horror movies were kind of, at least sort of commercial horror movies, there was a drought, and the meta kind of aspect or the narrative that was interwoven, you know, Wes Craven had done that with A New Nightmare, but that was kind of like a test run. And then before that, you had a movie called There's Something Out There, which kind of also is kind of considered a precursor to Scream. And then there's a little bit of that in Jason Lives, Friday the 13th, Part 6, where there's kind of like a winking to the camera, like, we're in on the joke now kind of thing. But Scream was the one that really popularized it in a way that kind of felt fresh and cutting edge for the time, in the same way that when The Matrix came out, it was considered revolutionary. And now when you're having these legacy sequels or requels or whatever you kind of want to
Both
call them,
Resurrections and this movie, both trying to do similar things.
they feel like they're not, like they're dated, like they're not bringing anything new to the table, and there are films that have surpassed them in kind of the cleverness of what they're doing. So it's just kind of feels like it's just a sequel and not anything really new, if you
Yeah.
get what I'm trying to
No,
say.
I totally get what you're saying, and I don't disagree with what you're saying. And I think the movie tries to get away with that by saying, "Oh, we know and we'll reference it." Um, like the movie knows what it's doing in every death and ultimately the climax and the reveal, and it is derivative, but because they know it's derivative and they reference that it's derivative and that the point is that toxic fandom, all they want is the same thing over and over again, or they want to go
And
back
you
to the
can't meddle
original.
with the thing that I feel
Um,
I have ownership over.
Right. So you need to give me what I want, and it needs to be kind of back to what I liked about the original. So that's why I think it's interesting the movie even being titled Scream, ultimately having the exact same opening and climax of the first movie. The same
In
reveal
the same
of
setting.
in the same setting with the boyfriend, with like, which are like the most obvious things, which is why I found myself like a little disappointed in the end of the movie, because you go, oh, okay, they're gonna do that. And the movie knows it's doing that, and it's almost going, yeah, that was what we wanted to do the whole time. We never really tried to hide it that much. We tried to kind of trick you, but it was pretty obvious, I found. Um, and because the movie is self-referential and is doing those things at The Matrix, I think it does it a little bit better than The Matrix Resurrections.
I
But
agree
like,
with that as well. But you
um,
know what I'm saying, where it's like, okay, when the original ones for both of those
sure, it
franchises
was
came out,
groundbreaking at that
yeah,
time, where
and
this
now it's
is.
like, well, they're not doing anything that they hadn't already
I would
established
have liked if they
in the
tried to
first
make an
film.
elevated horror movie, right? Like,
Yeah.
do something
Or
like
they went
that where
completely
like
wild, where
that's what
like
I mean,
they
yeah.
they add a supernatural element to it now, where
But then
like
that's what they're poking fun of Stab
Matthew
8, right?
Lillard comes back with like the TV box on
But
his
then that's
head.
almost a more interesting commentary, right? Because you're
Yeah.
making that commentary in the movie that
Because
Stab
they
8.
kind of try to do that with Skeet Ulrich
Yeah,
anyways.
because Stab 8 goes off the rails a bit, right, in the movie. But if
Yeah.
you would have just made Scream 5 or 5 Cream go off the rails and be something completely different, then you might have actually made some of those fans mad, which ultimately maybe would have been the point of doing it. And then that's kind of where you get into the meta nature of it, of going, yeah, we're going to take what you thought about Scream and say, fuck you, we're going to do something crazy with it. Where here, they're ultimately making their thesis statement, but then also giving into those people, because then that's ultimately what the movie they made. They even though the heroes quote unquote win, ultimately you're giving them the movie that those killers wanted, right? Like if you're looking at the meta levels of it, even though you kill them and you don't let them have whatever, they're still gonna become famous and understand that like they were the
Well, it
killers of
cheaps
this,
out
and
on
like,
that though as well, where it's
yeah.
saying like, okay, well now Gail is not going to write
But
about
no one
this.
else is going to.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Well,
And
there's already been a six is going to be
oh, I
shooting
know,
this
yeah.
summer. So it's like, okay, well, how are you going to continue this? And I guarantee they'll probably either kill off Courtney Cox's character or Nev Campbell
You
in
think
the
so?
opening.
Like, I don't even know if
I
you
think
like,
that
are you gonna
they
slowly kill off the original cast, or
I think so.
or do you leave Nev Campbell and she's the only one that
The
ends up
sole
surviving?
survivor.
Yeah. Um, like again, and I want to say, like, I enjoyed the movie. Like, I thought the kills were gruesome. They're not overly creative, but like, I had fun with them, and
Well,
like,
Dylan Minette's, I think, is pretty
yeah,
brutal when he
I
gets
like
stabbed
him a
in the
lot
neck.
too.
He
Yeah.
does not have a good time when it comes to horror
Yeah.
movies. Don't
Yeah.
Breathe,
Yeah.
Scream, even in Prisoners, like nothing like physically bad happens to him, but a lot of emotional stress.
Yeah, and that knife through the neck, that slow knife through the neck is really, really
And
brutal.
it's also
Um,
referencing Saving Private Ryan, like that one
yeah.
sequence. And like even Jamie King's death is kind of interesting because it like they talk about like, oh, no one cares about a character who
From
is a late
yeah.
entry addition and things like that. And then like I also kind of laughed. It's like the true tragedy of Scream 5 is that she didn't get the sushi.
Do you think they kill her off to try to throw you off that they're gonna kill off Arquette? That's what I assume. And then
I think
like,
a little bit, but even to throw off that they're going to do a double kill in that scene where they kill
that's
off
true,
both
yeah.
mother and
And
son
son, yeah.
and do
And I
both
think,
in a dirty way.
and because it's right after the sequence when they said they're only going to kill surviving members of the original kind of thing, right? That's why I think they go to them, right?
Yeah.
Um, But I agree with you, and I shat on Melissa Barrera a bit. There was a point where Nevis turned to me and went like, "She's not very good," and I'm like, "Nevis, I thought the exact same thing." But here's the thing: I don't think you need to be very good in these movies. So like, I
No.
don't mean that as like I don't think it's a to her acting skills. I just think it's a Scream movie. Like again, Nev Campbell wasn't great, but she worked, and I like her in all 5 movies. So like, it's totally fine. I like the Ryan Johnson reference to Stab 8, and that, Ghostface has a chainsaw, and it's just like over the top and ridiculous. I thought that was fun. The YouTube videos and stuff like that. You see Kirby for a moment on one of the YouTube thumbnails that she's survived and still around. So
So they'll probably bring
um,
her back.
I wouldn't be surprised if she's in 6. But yeah, I agree with you that I like the rest of the cast. Like, and all of their connections to the original ones were all silly. And that's I'm like, you all are friends, and you hang out at Stu's old house where these murders took place, where your family members were participants or were murdered, and I'm like, it's just a little weird. And then yeah, Jack Quaid, they do a good job of making you like him. But I think it was pretty obvious. Like,
Well,
I
even
don't know,
when
like,
Dewey
yeah,
calls it at the
yeah,
beginning, it's kind of like, well, maybe you should have just been listening. I
yeah.
mean, again, it's supposed to throw you off, where it's like you're pointing out the obvious, but it can't be the obvious, but it ultimately is
But
sometimes
to
the
try to
most
trick
obvious
you, they
thing.
do go
Yeah.
with the obvious, because then that, yeah,
But I'm also I'm also pretty sure that, like, with a movie like this, that they probably had like multiple endings or alternate versions of, like, okay, the
I
killers
think they did
were
talk
these
about that.
people
Yeah.
or this, or like at least in the script stage. I mean, I don't know if they shot anything else where they kind of like maybe like did sort of audience test screenings and to see like
Yeah.
kind of like what worked the best, but I could probably guarantee that there were probably other versions of where it's like, okay, well, like maybe it would be interesting to have, one of Randy's family members, the niece or nephew be one of them,
Yeah.
or this person be it, or
I
or
always thought
that.
it was gonna
So
come back to Stu, because my theory watching it, which almost came true, was that I
Father
called the
Stu.
bit. Well, I thought they were related to Stu, so my theory
Yeah, like
wasn't
Mark
that.
Wahlberg, Father Stu.
Yeah, yeah. I thought that Mikey Madison's character and Jack Quaid were secretly, like, again, maybe niece and nephew, whatever, however related to Stu. And I thought it was going to be that, Billy Loomis gets all the credit for those original murders, and Stu is the guy everyone forgets about. And I thought that that was going to be their connection, was that they had some connection with Stu, and that they were actually brother and sister or something like that. And that secretly did this whole thing. And because they were mad that they're
They wanted to give
whatever.
credit where credit was
Yeah.
Stu.
Yes, exactly, Eric. That was my theory. I got about like 66% right, because Stu's house does come back as a focal point, but the connection is that Amber moved in there and became obsessed with it or something. And that she's just met, Richie, Jack Quaid's character, on the Reddit for the Stab movies. So I
Right.
just feel like that connection. I like this stuff about toxic fandom and things like that. And I'm not saying everything needs to be connected to original characters and things
But it
like
is a
that, but
stretch to go from
um
like hating where a franchise is gone and like being like this weird obsessive diehard fan to like actually trying to
murder people.
orchestrate this grand
But
scheme.
I like that silliness of
I
the
mean,
Scream
yeah,
movies,
it
right?
is very
And it isn't
melodramatic
it,
and over the top, but
and it's an extreme version, and there are
yeah,
people who
extreme
are
scream.
crazy fans of things, right? That do psychotic
Oh
things. Maybe
no,
they
I'm
don't
not
murder
doubting that. It's
people.
just like it's just interesting, like how kind of convenient it
Oh,
all
I agree.
is
The
with.
convenience of it all is
Yeah,
silly, and that's part of the thing that takes you out of it a little bit. But it's still like a fun ride going through, and people knowing what's happening and referencing it and saying, oh, like they twist on things of like going into the basement instead of the garage. And like they do kind of interesting things to twist some stuff that happened in that original movie. And I think like watching Scream 1 and watching this one like right after each other could be a lot of fun to kind of see how much they pulled from that first one. And then what excites me more, I am excited for Scream 6, because I do think Radio Silence has a lot of potential. I think Ready or Not, also not a perfect movie, is a lot of fun.
Yeah,
And
we
I
should
think
say
that
it's Matt
it's 2 out of the
Bat
3 of them,
yeah,
right?
so Matt Bettinelli,
Olpin,
Olpin,
yeah, and
and Tyler Gillett, but
yeah,
also one of the writers is Gary Busick, who helped write Ready or Not. And
yeah,
then the other guy that also is credited as a screenwriter is James Vanderbilt, who wrote Zodiac,
yeah.
or adapted Zodiac.
So
And
Kevin Williamson also, he gets, like, a special thanks, right? But he's
yeah,
not,
because
like
it's like it probably like an executive producer, but also like based on the characters by Kevin Williamson. But it's also interesting because there's a scene where Jenna Ortega's character is in the hospital
yeah, she's
watching
watching.
Dawson's
Yeah,
Creek. Dawson's Creek is a show
by
created
Kevin
by
Williamson.
Kevin Williamson.
Yeah, I love that. So yeah, I had fun with it, man. Like, I
And
think
also, this
the
is the first film that Wes Craven didn't direct. We should also say that because
yes,
he is,
for Wes, for
yeah,
Wes, which they really hammer home.
yeah,
Uh,
because Dylan Minette's character is named Wes.
so when they kill him off, they have like a party for that
A
character, a
toast.
toast to him. And like there was like some Easter eggs that they got all the cast from the other movies to record that for West toast, and they used that audio,
It's
and it
like
was meant
the
as a
Jedi's in
yes,
Rise of
exactly.
Skywalker.
There you go. It always goes back to those legacy
Ray,
sequels.
Ray, Ray.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential with Radio Silence, and like it seems like they really like this franchise and they're invested to be coming back and doing a sixth one. I mean, this one did pretty well, and then like it'll be interesting, I guess. And obviously, Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega's characters having Carpenter as their last name is funny, and then yeah, we didn't talk a lot about it, but the Billy Loomis stuff I was not expecting. I thought the CG Billy Loomis looked really good. They keep getting better and better at obviously the lips still not perfect.
Well, the
Those
eyes, I think, are the other
um
thing. Like,
yeah,
I think that there's still that weird, like, uncanny valley dead eye thing where, like,
it kind
even
of
though
works in this for
it,
this,
well, it
but
does because he's a
yeah.
psychopath, and but it's also weird that like the way that she is imagining him or seeing
Is in the
him
moments
is,
before he dies,
yeah, instead
which
of
doesn't
like
make any
just like
sense.
looking at a photo of him or something like that maybe
Like I
she
get I think
saw.
that yeah. I I think maybe because they reference stabs so much and you do see is it Luke Wilson who plays Billy
Yes,
Loomis?
with those
Like
sweet with those
yeah.
sweet bangs.
So, but really then shouldn't she be seeing the Luke Wilson version of her dad? But I'm
Or
sure she's
but
seen
there is a scene in this film, and I think again it's in the hospital when they're, or no, it's when they're at um Heather Mazzarato's house, who plays Randy's younger sister, the mother of the
Martha
twins.
Meeks, yeah.
When they're watching like
I
the
went to the
each
bathroom. Is she in the movie?
yeah,
Oh,
she
so I missed
literally
that
like
part.
gets
Yeah.
them food and stuff
I
like
missed
that.
that.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
there's, it's either that scene or it's a hospital scene. It's again, it's been a couple weeks, but there's a moment where there's like the True Hollywood Story, and then there's a photo
Yeah.
of Billy Loomis,
Yeah.
and then Billy, it's
That's
just
on
like
the
Skeet
TV. Yeah.
Ulrich being like,
It's clearly a shot from the first Scream movie. Yeah.
yeah,
And
but
that's
it does look like a normal photo, but
so I'm sure she's seen photos of her dad. So she
yeah,
probably took what she saw in Stab, which is a pretty accurate retelling because it's Scream, of what happened at those murders, and then kind
yeah.
of put two and two together. Even though for us as an audience, we see Billy Loomis like we last saw him at the end of Scream 1. So it is a bit silly, but it is something that I was totally not expecting. And it happens throughout. And I will
Yeah, it's
give
not just like one scene. Like you think like, oh, it's going to be like one moment that is kind of the
it's
reveal
a
that
little
she's
weird at the end where
related.
he's like gives the nod to her and
Yeah.
stuff.
You
Like
did it,
yeah,
kid.
I was like, ah. I'm like, okay, that's a choice. And then I do like some of the playful sequences. Going back to the Dylan Minette murder, um, uh, the playing with the horror tropes of like things popping up behind the fridge or the mirror or things like that. Like it's really like obvious stuff, but it is still very playful. And then that's kind of what I really, really dug and had a lot of fun of every time he closes a door, you think something's gonna pop up and then nothing does, and then
Well,
it
also
eventually gets you.
the best thing I think about this entire franchise is one, the design of
Oh
Ghostface, but
god,
two,
iconic. Yeah,
the way that Ghostface moves. I like that Ghostface is kind of awkward
clumsy.
and
Yeah,
clumsy. Like
it's the
even though it
best.
was parodied and made fun in the scary movies, it works so well. Like I think
Because
that's kind of interesting.
no other horror villain is kind of like that, right? Like
No,
I like that each time it's a teenager who doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, and like they ultimately don't know what the hell they're doing, but can create these incredibly elaborate plans with two people that can murder people in like insane ways, but also trip over everything and like stumble and like um
or you
eh,
throw something at
yeah.
them.
Um, it's great. But yeah, the movie has its issues, but I ultimately had quite a bit of fun with it, and I'm kind of excited to see. Like, I have no idea what they would tackle in the next one, right? Because they covered this legacy sequel thing. You know, in the original Scream 2, they talked about sequels. In the third one, they talked about finishing a trilogy,
Yeah, you
and
got to
then
shoot him in the head,
and
and
then you know in 4 they did reboots, so they've kind of gone through reboots, legacy sequels, requels, whatever you want to call them. So like maybe it is that elevated horror thing, or maybe it is like I don't know what they possibly could comment on that they haven't commented on. And
yeah, especially because this one does cover so much ground in terms of like what it's kind of missed in the last 10 years or so, of like where horror's kind of gone with sort of the different styles of subgenres within sort of the mainstay of horror, and then like again toxic fandom, but also kind of just looking at where legacy sequels can go. Like it kind of feels like a lot of these legacy sequels are one and done, and then when you do another one, it does feel diluted to a certain degree, like something like Creed 2, which I didn't mind. I think Creed 2 still has a lot of good stuff in it, but it did not have the same impact as that first Creed movie. And I think almost a part of it is that time plays a factor in it all. Like I think if you give a franchise enough room
to be
between
away, yeah.
sequels to be away, so you can kind of gather new material for something like this, then that works. But because it was successful and because it's kind of rebooted the franchise again, they've got to do another one again. So do they kind of like comment more on the second one, or do they do like a remake specifically again instead of a reboot?
That's what I thought. Like, do you yeah, I don't know. You could cast all new people and then comment on that as well. Like
Yeah,
that you completely reboot it, and that I don't know, man. It'll be interesting, or some sort of spin-off thing, or whatever.
it just makes me wonder if they're going to bring.
Spin-offs, I guess, would be like the one thing. Maybe Ghostface isn't the killer. It's like that'd be weird, but
Well, Ghostface, like that's the other thing as well. When we refer to Ghostface, it's like it's not a person; it's just
no.
a
But that's one thing that's
disguise.
also fun because the voice is always the same. It's always Roger L. Jackson. Like you always have the same costume, and I like that Ghostface becomes the villain, even though it's two different people every time. Last thing I will say is I do wish that they maybe had for a point there I was like, oh, they'll probably do three killers or they'll do only one killer, because I was like, that's different, right? Like usually it's always two people, it's always this, it's like maybe it's three people this time or whatever, but
Or crossovers.
um
That could be one that they could do for 6.
right.
It would be amazing. It's like literally like the end of part 6. It's like the reveal of the villain. It's like da 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 da, and Tobin Bell comes
I
out,
would love it.
and it's
uh
Jigsaw is it's Jigsaw and Scream, or Saw Scream, or Scream Saw, or something like
who
that.
could you like, so Paramount's distributing it, do you have any other property you could
Well, Friday the 13th
clearly,
was
yeah. But
Paramount.
that's a weird, a lot of these horror things are weird
And
with
they've
the
already
ownership,
referenced
right?
Friday the 13th, right? So
Oh,
that would
that'd be
also be
even,
really
well,
strange.
they've
But
referenced a lot of horror
yeah,
movies, right? So I don't know what they do, but I do wish they did something different with the killers in this one, even though I get what their point was. I just wish there was a third person or some sort of reveal that
still
was a
better
little
than
bit.
part 3 though.
Oh, it is.
That villain is
Um,
terrible.
yes. Yeah, and that's when Scream gets almost too silly.
Where it
Like
almost
where
becomes the horror version of a soap opera or
yes,
Fast and
and
Furious
it's
movie.
like you couldn't even really solve that stuff. Like with some of the things that they bring up, you're like, you're just revealing this to me now. Like you never really gave me clues for it. And like I like how silly it is where everything comes full circle and like everything's connected and shit like that. Like it is really ridiculous. And you know, 4 and this one toned back some of the more ridiculous elements like remember the voice changer in 3 could do anyone's voice,
Yeah.
like just any human being's voice.
It was like a
And
talk
like
boy.
it was so dumb.
That
But
would
yeah,
be amazing if Ghostface had a talk
yeah.
boy.
Um,
Credit card, you got it.
I will agree that I really like 4 quite a bit. I think I liked 4 more than this one, to be honest. But like, I
That is out there.
I don't know, man. Like, I think
I think this
4
is
for the time that
I think
it
this is better than 3 and 4. I don't think this one matches 1 and 2
I
though.
agree. I mean, I think 4 and this one, I both liked either of them. On my rewatch, I liked 4 quite a bit. I thought For the Time in 2011 when that was made, I really like the cast of that movie as well. Um, I actually like 4 quite a bit, but I would put 4 maybe even above 2. But I
Ooh, that is
and
truly controversial. I
this
I
is
would put it like even though I don't like 4, I would still put 2 over it just for that opening sequence in the
sure, the
theater.
theater one is great. No, I get you, but I like the meta stupid like that funny stab opening of 4 I think is great as well with stunt casting and stuff like that too. And I like a lot of the references they made about remakes and stuff like that in 4. Again, I like all of these movies, even 3, which is bad. Like again, it's one of those bad movies that I will continuously watch because I like this franchise and I will go through and watch them. Like 3 is almost so bad it's kind of fun if you go back to it. Um because the whole movie within a movie kind of thing and the actors like it's campy, it's so over the top and silly that like I kind of buy into it. um I do agree it's the worst one, but like I still have fun watching it. So that being said, I liked Five Cream. I'm excited to see where it goes in the future. I think it's not without its kind of issues, and I think it doesn't think it's more clever than it is, but I don't think that you can just go like, well, that was the point, and then just do the same thing. And I'm like, I just wanted you to be a little bit more. Like I wanted a little bit more from the ending and even the kills and stuff like that. So some great stuff. David Arquette's great. I think most of the cast is great. I really do like the Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett. So I'm excited to see what they do with this franchise moving forward. So I'm gonna give it a 3.5 out of 5.
I'm going to give it a 3.
Fair, fair. Um, Are you looking forward to more? Or it goes back to your
Yeah,
point of like,
I mean I'm looking forward to it and just like I'm curious to see where it'll go like just having this conversation about like okay, well
yeah,
what can they do,
because you got to
between
think,
a year,
yeah,
of between finishing this film, releasing it, then doing another one, and probably it will pick up a year later or
which
less
is
than a year later,
which
like
is
the
very much
second
what that
one did.
original trilogy did,
Well,
right?
yeah, the
So
first two were literally shot like the first one came out, the second one shot back to back, and then the third one it took a little longer because Kevin Williamson didn't even write the script because at that point he went on to direct Teaching Mrs. Tingle, which is not a good movie.
funny name though.
So he got it was with Helen Mirren and Katie Holmes, and so he got like a story or like characters credit, but that was the one that kind of took a little bit longer. Oh, that was the other person that like, we said Cotton Weary, but I think Liev Schreiber is the most interesting character in that original
Trilogy, yeah.
trilogy. So, and I don't think that there's a character in this movie that is as complex or interesting as Cotton was. Um, so it would be interesting to maybe introduce somebody or build on something that maybe is there. I don't know, but
Yeah, because
yeah,
you got to think. So just to wrap everything up, to hypothesize. So you have Sam and Tara coming back, which is Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. Then you have the twins. The Meeks twins survived,
yeah.
both of them. So Jasmine Savoy Brown and Mason Gooding. They're the only survivors, right?
Well, you said Gail and Sydney, right?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Gail and Sydney, but I don't even know if you bring them
Tying up
back.
loose ends.
I don't know
I
if you
almost
bring them
feel like
back.
that would be like kind of a part of like the killer's motivation is to like finally finish it all and like tidy, like
Yeah.
just completely clean slate.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what you do. There was rumors Samara Weaving was going to be cast because she worked with them on Ready or Not, and she couldn't do it because she was
Scheduling.
doing another movie. She was in Australia for something. She's
I think it
doing
was. I think
something
it was to do with COVID. I think I read
because
something
she was
about it. As
in Australia for a movie, and maybe she couldn't get over here. I think that's what she said. She couldn't
get over here.
because of COVID, she couldn't do it. Because I think she was supposed to play Sam, and then there was rumors that Lily Reinhart was gonna play Tara, and they were gonna play sisters originally, and then they got Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. So maybe you bring Samara Weaving in the next one, bring her as a new character. You got to think you're gonna have someone play their mom, who they haven't revealed. That was another thing where she's like in Europe and she doesn't come back when her
I mean,
daughter's
that's
been
kind
like.
of like a classic horror movie
I
thing, though,
know
as
the dad in
well.
the first movie too, right? Like, even though he was kidnapped for a lot of it, but like I get that. It's just it's another one of those really silly things of like her daughter was literally stabbed a bunch of times, and she's like, I can't, I gotta work. I'm in Europe, sorry.
No, I agree. I agree with you. That is ridiculous, but they really go out of their way to establish that this is like such a broken family, and to the point where like the sisters are so estranged that they're not on talking terms at all. The mother hasn't talked to the Melissa Barrera
Fair, yeah.
character. Like she's not even really
But then that's another reason to come home, to be with your daughter that's
no,
has
again,
been
in the
stabbed.
real world it wouldn't work that way. She would come
In
back.
the Scream universe, the parents nowhere to be found.
Yeah, and that's I mean, again, like it plays into the cliches of horror, like anytime someone gets into a car, the car's never going to start. If somebody's running away from a killer,
Oh,
they're
and I
going to
love it.
trip
It's
on
fun, yeah.
something. But yeah, I feel almost like they'll try to find like a way to retcon like who the mother is, and yeah, like they'll probably bring in maybe some like in these horror films there's always veteran character actors from Henry Winkler to Lance Hendrickson. So I'm sure that the radio silence guys will try to
Kill off
bring
Dylan McDermott, or was it Dylan McDermott or Dermot Mulrooney?
in which one?
Isn't he in 2 or 3?
It's
Isn't
been
one of them?
so long.
Where that's who she references, Mark, my husband. Remember they get together in 2 or 3.
Patrick Dempsey's in.
Patrick Dempsey's who I'm
Yeah,
thinking of.
yeah, the
Why did I think
cop
of Dermot Mulrooney? Patrick
McDreamy.
McDreamy. Sorry.
Yeah,
He's in it, and he wasn't in this, which is interesting, even though she's married to him. Kill him off. I think you kill Sydney and Courtney Cox in the opening of the next movie. Kill them both.
right. And bring back Liev Schreiber. 100% cotton.
That's the other thing. Like, is it jumping the shark? But I would love them to bring back someone you thought was dead. Like, that's, I think,
Yeah.
would be fun.
Well, I mean,
Like,
if they do it in the Fast and Furious movies, so like why not?
I wanted Stu, like you said, with the TV on his head or something, like it
yeah.
melted on.
Or he
his
was like
face.
he's been in a coma and we didn't know about it
Yeah.
for over 26 years. Like
Yeah.
that would be funny. Or Timothy Oliphant comes back, or I don't know, like
Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah.
I mean, he's hella dead. He was a good guy though, right?
Yeah. He was a
you
red
thought
herring.
he was, yeah.
And then he just gets shot in the chest when he's naked and strapped to the cross. And then he gets his dick bitten off in Piranha 3D.
And we'll end it there, everyone. Thanks for listening. I'm excited that we finally were able to talk about 5 Cream. if you like whodunits, it's a good time for you. We also have a review up for Death on the Nile, which you guys can check out. That one will be spoiler free, so we won't reveal. Although, as our friend Peter pointed out, Peter, I understand it's an old whodunit that's been around for 80 years and that many people have read. Guess what? I haven't, so I didn't know what was gonna happen.
They did change
okay?
some stuff though.
Okay, I'm curious to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
Maybe not on the review, but afterwards. So go check out our review of Death on the Nile. Also, the after party on Apple TV Plus. We have a review up for the first 3 episodes, but episode 5 is dropping right now, which you guys can check out. Which
And
is
Knives Out 2 will be out this year as well.
It's huge for whodunit fans right now, and I like that format. It's just fun. I like outsmarting it, but then when I outsmart it, I go, damn, I wish they outsmarted me. Anyways, go check those out. And our 114th episode where we talk about the Oscar nominees. So some great insight from 2 primo Oscar pundits. We just got all the inside scoops, all the what the voters were thinking, because we are the number 1 and number 2 Oscar pundits. So go check out the 114th episode of the Untitled Movie Podcast. And we also talk about other things. We will have a Super Bowl episode, Super Bowl Spectacular, where we talk about some trailers and commercials, because we'll just shield every corporation this weekend. So check that out next week. If you want to find everything, YouTube, podcast services, just throw in Untitled Movie Podcast, or a one-stop shop over on Letterboxd, which is Untitled_movies. As always, my name is Matt Rohrbeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at UntitledMoviePodcast.com and soon on Family Feud Canada. So please go check that out, 7:30 Eastern on CBC. You guys can check that out. I don't know when my questions might be on the air. It might not be for a long time, but I'll let you know. Don't worry,
at least
everyone.
we'll know who done it.
You can follow me on all the social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. It's you.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were gonna you were caught on I'm gonna say something else.
That's what I say, right? You can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck. Yeah, now it's you.
Yeah, but you paused, your face was like, oh, am I forgetting something? Yeah,
it was that. But then as I was doing that, I'm like, oh, this is when Eric goes now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm Eric Fortune. You can follow or find more of my reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at em6211.
Until next time,
I'll be right back.
Who would play us in a stab movie about people talking about stab?
Any angry YouTuber.
All right. Bye, everyone.